Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. My name is Wiz Loiza, and today I'm going to be talking about the Monarchy to Malachi, and in general, the Old Testament of the Bible. To kick us off, let's recap what we talked about last semester. In the prehistoric times to start out, there were the first three cataclysmic events. We have the creation, fall, and the flood. Very soon after that, we have the second millennium, and this is already where the first book of the wisdom literature from this semester comes in, with the book of Job happening around the same time as the patriarchs. This book deals a lot with kind of some themes of endurance. And then we have the patriarchs of Genesis, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Joseph's really important because his descendants and his brother's descendants all become the nation of Israel, as we'll see all the way over here. Then we have the rest of the Pentateuch, and then the initial books of Israel history. So we have the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Judges. We see themes of the Exodus, of the law, them wandering in the wilderness, and then in the Joshua Judges, we see Israel's absolute domination and conquest of the land of Canaan. And this is where we see them fall under the rule of the judges in the latter of those two books. They're first rulers, although we are yet to get to the kings. Then we get to the kings. So we have our first collection of Israel history literature, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and 2 Kings. Originally the Samuels were one book and the Kings were one book, and then together they made a 2-volume history of Israel, all written by the same author, though we don't know who that is now. In the book of 1 Samuel, this is largely characterized by the rule of Saul, who ruled in the late 1000s. 2 Samuel is characterized by the rule of David in the early 900s. And 1 Kings is characterized by the rule of Solomon in the mid-900s. These three kings are the first three kings of Israel, and together they make up the United Kingdom of Israel. David is very much associated with the book of Psalms, which is a book of worship and praise. And then Solomon is associated with the book of Psalms, although it's largely mostly David. Solomon did get 2 Psalms in. Then the book of Proverbs, which is a book of wisdom. Ecclesiastes, about taking advantage of the day that God has given you and what he has allowed you to have. And the book of Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, which is the book about love. And then we get the final book in the original Israel history collection, 2 Kings, which deals with the United Kingdom not being so united. They turned a divided kingdom. At this point, they split into the north, Israel, and the south, Judah. In the 8th century, we get our first 5 prophets, Jonah, Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, and Micah. Then Israel gets exiled, the northern kingdom of Israel gets exiled in 722. And then in the 7th century, while Judah's still hanging around, we get the books of Joel, Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah by those prophets, respectively. Then we get kind of the sequel for Israel's history, the book of Chronicles, now split into 1st and 2nd Chronicles, written probably by Ezra, a character that we'll see in just a minute. The book of Chronicles talk about Judah getting exiled. So Judah gets exiled in 3 waves. The first wave is in 605, covered in the book of Daniel, our next prophet. And then 597, the second wave, covered in the book of Ezekiel, another prophet. And then the final wave in 586, talked about by Jeremiah, again, another prophet, with the final wave of the Judean exile. He also wrote the book of Lamentations on the subject as well. But then, due to Cyrus's decree, Judah gets returned, also in 3 waves, just as they were exiled. The first wave is in 522, led by Zerubbabel, who restored the temple. The second wave is in 458, led by Ezra, who restored the law. And the third wave is in 445, led by Nehemiah, who restored the wall. Now, a few other events happen in this time period as well. We have the books of Haggai and Zechariah, these 2 prophets, who were basically talking to the people of Israel, saying, we got to rebuild the wall. And they happened around the same time as Zerubbabel. They were talking about how to rebuild the temple around the same time as Zerubbabel, which makes sense. Then we get the book of Esther in 480, where she saved the people of Israel from complete extinction by Haman between the first and second waves. And then the book of Chronicles was written probably by Ezra. So this would have been around the time he was restoring the law in Israel in 458. And then we get our final event, the writing of the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah were originally one single book, with them written each section by Ezra and Nehemiah. Around the time of Nehemiah, they were close friends and collaborated on that project, but then those 2 sections were split into their own separate books due to the variances in authorship. Then, post-return, we get our final 2 prophets. The first of which is Obadiah. Now, Obadiah is a really funny guy because we actually genuinely have no idea when this dude lived. He could have lived as early as the 9th century, way back here, and been the first prophet chronologically before any of these guys. Or he could have lived as late as the 4th century and been literally the last prophet chronologically. We genuinely have no idea. One other common theory is that he lived during the exile up here. But the theory that this class is going with is that he lived during the return, sometime around the time of Zerubbabel. And then we have Malachi, our final prophet chronologically, who lived in the 5th century and would have been the last chronological prophet, assuming you don't go with the 4th century Obadiah theory. His books talked a lot about the coming of the Messiah and trying to get the people of Israel ready for their salvation. But then their salvation did not show up. 400 years goes by before he actually does, in the person of Jesus in the 1st century AD, but that's in the New Testament. My name is Wiz Loiza. Thank you for joining me on talking about the monarchy to Malachi in the Old Testament.